Please forgive us as it's a little loud in our lab today, but we hope this video will help you teach and facilitate this activity with your own students. If you'd like to jump right to the experiment, go to 3 minutes and 40 seconds into this video. If you'd like to go right to the expected results, go to 4 minutes and 32 seconds.
Hi, my name is Christina from URI 4-H, and I'm a member of Project Strive. Today, I'm going to demonstrate to you how to teach and facilitate the baking soda versus baking powder experiment.
The goal of this activity is to 1. Give participants the opportunity to conduct a scientific experiment. 2. Help participants develop an understanding of the variables in this experiment and the importance of controlling these variables to conduct a fair test. 3. Help participants understand the chemical differences between baking soda and baking powder. And 4. Help participants apply this knowledge to real-life cooking and baking in their own kitchen. For this activity, you will need baking soda, baking powder, preferably made with cornstarch, cream of tartar, and baking soda, vinegar, dish soap, water, plastic cups, a spoon for mixing, measuring spoons, labels or a marker for labeling your cups, and safety goggles and an activity sheet for all students. Let's head back into the lab.
In this lesson, students see if they can tell the difference between baking soda and baking powder. They will add vinegar to both to see that more gas is produced when vinegar is added to pure baking soda. First, discuss with your students the best way to conduct an experiment. You want to use the same amount of all variables. So make sure students measure out the same amount of baking soda, the same amount of baking powder, and add vinegar to the baking soda and the baking powder at the exact same time. That way, they'll be able to clearly see that the vinegar reacting with the baking soda produces more gas. Before we begin, make sure all students have properly fitting safety goggles. Vinegar can irritate the skin and can cause severe eye irritation. To make detergent solution, add together 2 tablespoons of water with 1 teaspoon dishwashing soap. To make baking powder, add together 1 tablespoon baking soda, 1 tablespoon cream of tartar, and 1 tablespoon cornstarch. Explaining to the students that this is what baking powder is very important. When we buy baking powder from the store, the work is already done for us.
Students are now ready to begin. If you would like your students to make their own measurements to do this experiment, you want to give each group 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of vinegar, a small amount of detergent solution, 1 teaspoon and 1/1/4 teaspoon measuring spoons along with a dropper, empty cups, you need 2 labeled vinegar, 1 labeled baking soda, and 1 baking powder. And don't forget goggles, activity sheets, and writing utensils for all participants. Remember, these measurements do not have to be perfect. The students will make accurate measurements when they do the experiment.
To perform this experiment, students will first place a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda and a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder into their labeled cups. Next, add 2 teaspoons of vinegar to each of the 2 empty cups labeled vinegar. Using a dropper, add 1 drop of detergent solution to the vinegar in each cup. Gently swirl each cup around to mix in the detergent as you go. Pour in the exact same amount of vinegar into each of the 2 cups. Compare how the 2 solids react with vinegar.
So if we look at an animation of this experiment, we have equal amounts of baking soda and baking powder. And to each, we add the same amount of vinegar with the same amount of detergent solution. This shows the relative difference in the amount of gas produced by baking soda and baking powder, but does not accurately show the actual amount of gas produced. But it does show more gas is produced by baking soda than baking powder. The question is why? We will discuss this more, but the baking soda is pure baking soda, which reacts with the vinegar. Whereas the baking powder, although it has baking soda that reacts with the vinegar, it also contains other ingredients.
After the experiment concludes, you'll want to discuss with your students why they got the results they did. And the reason is this: baking soda is a pure mixture of baking soda. It is a base that reacts with vinegar, which is an acid. Baking powder is diluted with cornstarch and cream of tartar. It still has baking soda in it, but not as much because it has those other ingredients too. So if you mix baking powder with vinegar, there's less of the baking soda to react with the acid. Baking soda is strong. In fact, it's about 3 to 4 times stronger than baking powder. But using limitless baking soda in our recipe doesn't mean that our recipe will keep on rising. The reason is baking soda has to bind with the acid in the recipe. That's what produces the carbon dioxide and gets your bread or other baked good to rise. But if you use more baking soda than there is acid, there will be leftover baking soda stuck in your food. And that creates a really yucky metallic taste. So if you don't use any acid, there will be even more baking soda because the baking soda has nothing to react with.
Students now know that baking powder contains baking soda. They know it is a mixture of baking soda with cream of tartar, which is a dry acid, and cornstarch. Both baking soda and baking powder are leaveners. This means they help your baked good rise. Let's go ahead and take a look at some recipes that use either baking soda or baking powder. Since baking powder already contains an acid in it, that cream of tartar, it's often used in recipes that do not contain an additional acidic ingredient. Now, recipes that call for baking soda do need that additional acidic ingredient in the recipe in order to react with. In this case, it's brown sugar or even that applesauce.
Now you may have this question: why do some recipes call for baking soda and baking powder? Well, these recipes contain an acid, maybe yogurt or brown sugar, but the combination of baking soda and the acid is not enough to make the baked good rise as much as you want it to. That's why baking powder is added as well, to add that necessary lift. This is Christina from Project Strive. Thank you so much for watching. We hope this video helps you conduct your experiment with your scientists.